chapter 19, verses 21 through 41, verses 21 through 29. After these things were ended, Paul proposed in spirit, when he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia, to go to Jerusalem, saying, After I've been there, I must also see Rome. So he sent into Macedonia 2 of them that ministered unto him, Timotheus and Erastus. But he himself stayed in Asia for a season. And the same time there arose no small stir about that way. For a certain man, named Demetrius, which made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small gain unto the craftsmen, whom he called together with the workmen of like occupation, and said, Sirs, ye know by this craft we have our wealth. Moreover, you see and hear that not alone at Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia this Paul hath persuaded and turned away much people, saying they be no gods which are made with hands. So that not only this our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised, and her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all of Asia and the world worshippeth. And when they heard these sayings, they were full of wrath, and cried out, saying, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. And the whole city was filled with confusion. And having caught Gasius and Aristarchus, men of Macedonia, Paul's companions in travel, they rushed with one accord into the theater. Burkett notes, Observe here, 1. How angry the devil grows at the success of the gospel, mentioned in the foregoing verses. There we read how the whole college of diabolical conjurers were brought over by the apostles' preaching at Ephesus, to burn their books and leave their wicked course of life. Hereupon the devil bestirs himself and raises a persecution against the apostle. Those that will disturb Satan in the quiet and peaceable possession of his kingdom shall be sure to meet with trouble and disquiet from him. Let not any of the saints of God in general, nor any of the faithful and zealous ministers of Christ in particular, expect any long continuance of their outward tranquility and peace in this world, where they are every day up in arms against Satan, and meditating the ruin of him and his kingdom, for which he will certainly seek revenge. Observe 1. The instruments which the devil employs to raise the storm of persecution against the apostle, namely, Demetrius, the silversmith, and his craftsmen, they looking upon St. Paul as one that impaired their profit and spoiled their trade of making silver shrines for Diana's temple by his crying down the worship of idols. But what were their silver shrines made for Diana's temple? Answer, the temple of Diana was at the time one of the 7 famous structures of the world, and the silver shrine made by these silversmiths were certain models or images of this temple, wherein their idol goddess Diana was set forth, which shrines or portable temples all the people of Asia carried about with them, to stir up the more their devotions towards this idol. So that this shrine-making must needs be a very gainful trade when all Asia was addicted to this superstition. No wonder then that Demetrius, upon the sight of the loss of his gain, made a horrible outcry, and set the city in an uproar. For carnal men, whose gain is their god and their godliness, account themselves undone when their god, Mammon, is in danger. If you take away their gods, what have they more? Learn hence that gain-getting and maintaining of men's livelihood are mighty temptations to carnal men to use impious means for supporting superstition and idolatry. Observe 3. The arguments which Demetri used to stir up the people against the apostle, and they are 3. 1. The plea of profit. By this craft we get our gain. If this man's doctrine obtain, our trade will quickly fall under disgrace and die. This was the most cogent, the most pungent argument that could be used. For though an argument drawn from our own interest is not the most weighty, yet it is usually the most persuasive. 2. The pretense of piety. Not only are we like to lose our livelihood, but our religion too. Our goddess Diana will be despised, her temple profaned, and her worshippers scorned. This easily heated the rabble's blood, put the multitude into a ferment, and caused a hideous outcry for 2 hours together. Great is Diana of the Ephesians. 3. The plea of the antiquity and universality, and the common consent of all worshippers. Diana, whom all Asia and the world worshippeth. As if Demetrius had said, What, shall we suffer the temple of Diana to be set at naught by the preachments of this babbler Paul? A place being so magnificent for structure, being some say 100, others 220 years a building. so renowned for the oracles of the gods, so magnified for the image that fell down from Jupiter, so honored by the oblations of the Asiatic potentates, and crowded with the devotions of the Ephesians, and admired throughout the whole world. Lord, what danger was the life of the great apostle now in? How did this popular tumult threaten the present destruction of him and his companions, Gassius and Aristarchus? Now is supposed to be the time when the apostle says that after the manner of men he had fought with beasts at Ephesus. And this is probably the deliverance which he gratefully commemorates in 2 Corinthians 1:10, who hath delivered us from so great a death, and doth deliver. In him we trust that he will yet deliver us. Verses 30 through 34. And when Paul would have entered into the people, the disciples suffered him not. And certain of the chief of Asia, which were his friends, sent unto him, desiring him that he would not adventure himself into the theater. Some therefore cried one thing, and some another, for the assembly was confused, and the more part knew not wherefore they were come together. But they drew Alexander out of the multitude, the Jews putting him forward. And Alexander beckoned with the hand, and would have made his defense unto the people. But when they knew that he was a Jew, all with one voice, about the space of 2 hours, cried out, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. Burkitt notes, observe here, 1. The undaunted courage of St. Paul in the cause of Christ. He resolves to adventure his life by going into the theater, there to make an apology for himself and his companions, and in defense of the Christian religion. He did not account his life dear unto him, but was willing not only to be bound, but to die for the name of Jesus. Observe, 2, how the divine providence is to be admired, and awfully adored, in directing to ways and means for the apostles' preservation in this time of imminent danger. God now made use of the advice, not only of the apostles' fast friends, the disciples, but of his foes, that is, certain people in Asia who were now become his friends, to dissuade him from going into the theater, lest he should have been torn to pieces by an outrageous rabble of insolent idolaters in this unaccountable uproar. It is all one with God to save by many or by few, by friends or by foe, for he can make enemies become benefactors at his pleasure, and command deliverance for his people, sometimes without means, sometimes by weak and contemptible means, sometimes by improbable and unlikely means, sometimes by opposite and contrary means. Lord, who would not trust thee in a time of imminent and impending danger, who hast all created nature at thy beck, the hearts of all in thy hands, the tongues and hands of the most unruly and outrageous in thy power, and wilt deliver thine in 6 troubles and in 7, and there shall be no evil touch them. Thou can and will deliver as often as thy children need deliverance, and save them from evil, even when they are in the midst of trouble. Observe 3, how the rabble at Ephesus treated Alexander being in the theater, the place where they judged offenders and cast them to wild beasts. They would not suffer him to make any defense for himself or the people of the Jews. This Alexander is supposed by many to be that Alexander who St. Paul afterwards told Timothy did him much evil. If so, we find here he was at first a proselyte, then a professor, next a confessor, almost a martyr, yet after all an apostate, making shipwreck of the faith, for which he was excommunicated by the apostle 1 Timothy 1:19 and 20. Of whom is Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have delivered unto Satan. This excommunication of the apostle probably was the provocation that occasioned him to do so much mischief to the apostle, of which he complains, 2 Timothy 14, Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil, of whom be thou aware also. Learn hence, 1, that it was possible for a glorious professor to turn a furious persecutor. This Alexander did not only withstand the apostle's person, but his doctrine also, for which, being excommunicated, he sought revenge. Learn, 2, that excommunication not only angers, but enrages wicked and impenitent men, so that, instead of being reformed, they seek revenge. Yet must the censures of the Church be executed and inflicted without either fear or favor. Verses 35 through 41. And when the town clerk had appeased the people, he said, Ye men of Ephesus, what man is there that knoweth not how the city of the Ephesians is a worshipper of the great goddess Diana, and of the image which fell down from Jupiter? Seeing then that these things cannot be spoken against, ye ought to be quiet, and do nothing rashly. For ye have brought hither these men, which are neither robbers of churches, nor yet blasphemers of your goddess. Wherefore, if Demetrius and the craftsmen which are with him have a matter against any man, the law is open, and there are deputies. Let them implead one another. But if you inquire anything concerning other matters, it shall be determined in a lawful assembly. For we are in danger of being called in question for this day's uproar, there being no cause whereby we may give an account of this concourse. And when he had thus spoken, he dismissed the assembly. Burkitt notes, observe here, 1, the instrument which God stirs up to stem the tide and to stop the stream of this harebrained assembly, and that is the town clerk, who was always present at their public meetings and registered all their city acts. His presence and eloquence God made use of to appease this tumult, to preserve the apostle, and to dismiss the assembly. Observe 2, the town clerk's oration was full of craft and policy, of fraud and fallacy. For he tells the multitude that St. Paul and his friends are against images only that are made with hands, whereas theirs was not such, but one that fell down from Jupiter. It was his duty, by office, to appease the rabble's rage, with reason and authority. He ought not have done it fallaciously, but we must consider he was a pagan, and his design was only to still the people. Accordingly, he encourages the credulous multitude to believe what the crafty priests had insinuated unto them, that the image which they worshipped was not made with hands, but fell immediately down from heaven, hoping thereby to gain more veneration to their idols, and get more pounds into their own purses. Thus God made use of the worldly and somewhat wicked eloquence of this heathen to preserve St. Paul. Observe 3, how God opens the mouth of this man to vindicate the apostle's innocency and his companions also. These men, saith he, are neither robbers of churches, nor yet blasphemers of your goddess. This is very likely that the apostles and the Christians at Ephesus had in wisdom asserted Christianity without saying much against Diana, which would have but enraged the multitude. Much less did they offer any violence either to her temple or her image. Note here that although the apostles were great enemies to these men's idolatry, yet did they offer no outward violence to their idol temples, neither to demolish them or deface any image in them. They well knew that such a work of public reformation was not their business, but the magistrates'. Therefore they endeavored by preaching to cast idols out of people's hearts, not by violence to throw them out of the temple. Thus ends this chapter with the account of St. Paul's marvelous, if not miraculous, preservation at the city of Ephesus, where being surrounded with difficulties and danger on all hands, yet being found in the way of his duty and in the work of his master, he escapes all perils. Safety evermore accompanies duty. When we are in God's way, we are under God's wing. Preservation and protection we shall have, if God may thereby be more glorified. But sometimes danger is better than safety, a storm more useful than a calm. And blessed be God for the assurance of his promise, that all things, be they mercies or afflictions, comforts or corrections, dangers or deliverances, life or death, all shall work together for the good of them that love God and are found steadfast in their obedience to him. Romans 8:28.